Tonight on United We Vote, Trump wins a second term.
God spared my life for a reason. And that reason was to save our country and to restore America to greatness.
And Harris concedes the race.
Hear me when I say, the light of America's promise will always burn bright.
Now, the country charts a path forward.
And Massachusetts re-elects a familiar face.
Hello, Massachusetts!
We're live tonight in Studio West from the College of Communication.
United We Vote starts now.
Good evening and welcome to United We Vote. I'm Eloise Lucina.
And I'm Giselle Animato. Donald Trump is now the 47th president of the United States of America, with J.D. Vance as his vice president. According to the AP, Trump won 295 Electoral College votes, while Democratic nominee Kamala Harris fell behind with 226. And unlike the 2016 and 2020 elections, Trump also won the popular vote by about 5 million. This is the first time a Republican candidate has won the popular vote since George W. Bush in 2004.
Now, Trump is only the second president who will serve 2 non-consecutive terms, following in Grover Cleveland's footsteps in the 1892 election. The president-elect spoke early this morning near his home in West Palm Beach, Florida.
Well, I want to thank you all very much. We overcame obstacles that nobody thought possible, and it is now clear that we've achieved the most incredible political thing. Look what happened. Is this crazy? So I want to thank the American people for the extraordinary honor of being elected your 47th president and your 45th president. And I said that many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason. And that reason was to save our country and to restore America to greatness. And now we are going to fulfill that mission together. We're going to fulfill that mission. The task before us will not be easy, but I will bring every ounce of energy, spirit, and fight that I have in my soul to the job that you've entrusted to me. I will not rest until we have delivered the strong, safe, and prosperous America that our children deserve and that you deserve. This will truly be the golden age of America.
Now, Trump was ahead of Harris the entire night, and that blue wall that many predicted never occurred.
And Trump won all 7 battleground states, most notably Georgia, which voted blue back in 2020, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania, which was the site of Trump's first assassination attempt.
Our polling correspondent Mason Jablonski is here to break down Trump's path to victory.
Thank you, Eloise. We've been studying this Electoral College map for the better part of 2 years now and wondering how it would fill out on Election Day. Now we finally have an idea of how everything is shaped up in the battle for the White House between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Here's how the map is looking. Right now, Donald Trump has 295 electoral votes in his column, surpassing the 270 needed to win the presidency. Vice President Kamala Harris has 226 electoral votes. We are still awaiting final projections in Arizona, Nevada, Maine, and Alaska. Starting in the Sun Belt and the crucial battleground state of Georgia, Donald Trump is projected to win the Peach State and its 16 electoral votes. Trump leads statewide by about 115,000 votes, 51% to 48%, with 98% of the vote reporting. Georgia was one of the top flip opportunities for the Trump team, with the former president leading in the polls by about 2 percentage points after Biden narrowly carried Georgia in 2020 by just under 12,000 votes. Shifting to the northern Rust Belt states, Donald Trump is projected to win Pennsylvania's crucial 19 electoral votes. Trump is leading statewide by 130,000 votes, 51% to 49%, over Harris with 98% reporting, after polls showed a dead heat headed into election night. For both campaigns, Pennsylvania almost certainly held the key to the White House. Once Trump picked up Pennsylvania, Harris's path to 270 became almost unattainable. A strong showing in Pennsylvania also gave us an indication of how Trump was performing in the other Rust Belt states of Wisconsin and Michigan. Trump carried all three of these states in 2016, which helped send him to the White House then and have played a pivotal role in his return to the presidency in 2024. Finishing our slate of battleground states, Donald Trump has also won Wisconsin and picked up 10 electoral votes. Trump is currently leading statewide by 29,000 votes, 50% to 49%, with 99% of the vote counted after polling suggested a neck-and-neck race. Winning Wisconsin was the moment that put Trump over the top, prevailing in the Badger State for the second time and repeating his unexpected win in 2016. Biden flipped Wisconsin back to the Democratic column in 2020 and restored the blue wall across the Rust Belt. But with his wins in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, Trump has pierced the blue wall once again and secured his path to return to the White House. Now, back to the desk.
Thank you, Mason. So Harris was supposed to address supporters at her alma mater, Howard University's watch party last night. But shortly after midnight, her campaign co-chair announced she wouldn't be coming. She finally took the stage at 4 this afternoon to give her concession speech.
But we must accept the results of this election. Earlier today, I spoke with President-elect Trump and congratulated him on his victory. I also told him that we will help him and his team with their transition, and that we will engage in a peaceful transfer of power. A fundamental principle of American democracy is that when we lose an election, we accept the results. That principle, as much as any other, distinguishes democracy from monarchy or tyranny. And anyone who seeks the public trust must honor it. At the same time, in our nation, we owe loyalty not to a president or a party, but to the Constitution of the United States.
Now this afternoon, President Joe Biden called Trump to congratulate him on winning. And Trump has accepted Biden's invitation to the White House to discuss the transfer of power. Biden will be addressing the nation on Thursday to talk about the election and the transition. Now, reproductive rights appeared on 10 state ballots this election cycle. 7 of those passed, including Missouri, the first state to ban abortion after Roe v. Wade was overturned. Abortion measures failed in 3 states, including Florida, while their initiative fell short of under 3% of yes votes to pass. In Nebraska, voters decided on 2 opposing amendments, the result being abortion access with certain restriction on. Our correspondent, Megan Amato, spoke to students right now on experts on this key issue.
As the results of the 2024 election roll in, one issue remains at the forefront of voters' minds: abortion. Since the overturn of Roe v. Wade in 2022, the landscape of reproductive health care is rapidly changing with varying laws from state to state.
Your zip code is very much linked to how well and healthy and what kind of access to care you have.
While reproductive rights are now up to the states, the presidential election still matters.
The president sets policies for the executive branch. So if the president were candidate Trump, then he could do things like revoke the letter that the Department of Health and Human Services sent to hospitals, reminding them that it's their responsibility to provide care that includes abortions to protect the health and life of people with medical emergencies.
Among college students, reproductive rights are a critical factor in their voting decisions.
Whether it's abortion or whether it's marriage equality or racial equality, all of these issues are kind of very intertwined. So it's really important to kind of set the precedent of personal freedom and keep it accessible on every level of government as to not prevent future encroachments.
Many are reflecting on their state's reproductive policies and the implications for their personal healthcare decisions.
I feel so grateful to be in a state that really prioritizes feminine care, and we live right next to a Planned Parenthood. I also think it's really important that women get a right to choose.
Healthcare providers are also grappling with the impact of this changing legal landscape.
Training for residents is getting harder and harder and harder in abortion care. I do fear what would happen if, Republicans took office and what other laws might go into place.
As the election wraps up, one thing is clear. The fight for reproductive rights is far from over. Voters will have the chance to make their voices heard and influence the future of healthcare access across the country during this election. I'm Megan Amato from BUTV, United We Vote.
Thank you, Megan. So students across campus followed the election day. Now, many are left with mixed reactions as they process the results. So our team spoke to students about their immediate responses to the news.
This past Trump campaign did a really good job of mobilizing its base voters. I think Dems have a lot of work to do in terms of mobilization.
I think people's rights are going to be taken away. I think trans rights are in jeopardy, LGBTQ rights are in jeopardy, reproductive rights are in jeopardy. I think sexual assault and rape, I can only imagine that that's going to go up.
January 6th to me should have been the end. That should have been it. And he's a felon, so in my opinion, that should have just not been. He should not.
The Senate flips Republican, but the House is still up for grabs. Up next, the latest on key congressional races after this break.
When it comes to making plans, you are the best. Those 9 months were also 273 days of planning. What about your daughter's first costume party? It was out of this world. And let's not forget those barbecues you plan in detail for your family and your more vegetarian by the day best friends. Surprise party for your parents' golden anniversary? You get the golden planning. The same way you plan each detail for those moments, start planning to protect you and your loved ones from a natural disaster. Sign up for local weather and emergency alerts. Prepare an emergency kit and make a family communications plan. Protecting your family is the best plan you can make.
If you need to do something to feel okay to drive, you're not okay to drive. Don't drive buzzed.
Welcome back. We're tossing it over to Mason with updates on the congressional races.
Thank you, Eloise. In the race for control of the U.S. Congress, Republicans are projected to win a majority in the Senate for the first time in 4 years. Control of the House of Representatives remains up for grabs, with 40 seats still uncalled. Heading into election night, the GOP had a slim 220-seat majority in the House of Representatives. Control of the House was practically a toss-up, with all 435 seats up for grabs and about 25 races considered to be in swing districts. Democrats needed a net gain of 6 seats to win control of the chamber. Right now, Democrats have won 190 seats, while 205 seats are in the Republican column. Some key races that have already been called include New York's 19th Congressional District, where Democrat Josh Riley flipped the seat by defeating Republican Mark Molinaro. Michigan's 7th District was a flip for the GOP, with Republican Tom Barrett defeating Democrat Curtis Hertel. We are still waiting for results in several closely contested races in Colorado, California, New York, Pennsylvania, Nebraska, and Iowa. In the U.S. Senate, Republicans will win control of the chamber for the first time since 2020. Headed into election night, Republicans only needed to flip 1 seat, assuming a Trump presidential victory, or 2 given a Harris victory. In West Virginia, Republican candidate Jim Justice was virtually a shoo-in to replace retiring independent Senator Joe Manchin. And in Montana, Republicans were optimistic about Tim Sheehy, a businessman and former Navy SEAL running against incumbent Democratic Senator Jon Tester. So far, Republicans have secured 52 seats, and on the other side of the aisle, Democrats have 42 seats. The GOP defended each of their incumbents and gained 3 additional seats. Justice and Sheehy both won their races, and Republican challenger Bernie Moreno defeated incumbent Sherrod Brown in Ohio. Democrats Tammy Baldwin and Alyssa Slotkin prevailed in close contests in Wisconsin and Michigan, 2 states Trump carried in the presidential race. Republicans still have a chance to expand their majority as we are awaiting Senate results in Pennsylvania, Nevada, and Arizona. We'll be watching how these races shake out and how the makeup of the next Congress might shape the policy agenda of the new Trump administration. Back to you, Giselle and Eloise.
Thanks, Mason. Now, not many people know what it's like to be the running mate to a woman presidential candidate, but our correspondent Fiona Holton spoke with someone who does.
Thanks, Eloise. Vice President Harris is the second woman to ever make it past the primaries in the presidential election. Today, we are joined by one of the few individuals who have witnessed what it means for a woman to be on top of a major party ticket. Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia, thank you for joining me today. It's great to have you.
Fiona, great to be with you and your BU colleagues.
Awesome. Let's jump into it. Regardless of the results of this election, it will be historic. We will either have our first woman president or a first convicted felon as president. What happens if former President Donald Trump wins this election?
First, it will be enormously disappointing. It was so disappointing when Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by millions, but not the Electoral College in 2016. I think it's pretty clear to me that Kamala Harris is going to win the popular vote again. So if she were to lose, it would be a repudiation of what the majority of voters want. But what we'll have to do in the Senate is stand up for American democracy and advance on any priority that we can, work hand in hand with the administration, but recognizing that Donald Trump has pledged to do damage to a lot of our institutions, we have to vigorously defend them.
You're up for your re-election. How are you feeling about your own race?
Fiona, I'm feeling good about it. The most recent polling has me in pretty good shape. The biggest priority for me is always making sure the economy is strong and making sure that it's particularly growing and strengthening in parts of the state that have been hard hit.
Your opponent, Hung Kao, is very critical of Democratic candidates. Was this year's race different for you in any way?
First, I'd never met him until my one debate. It's rare to be in politics and not know your opponent, but he won't come to events. I accepted 5 debates and he scrapped the first 4. And second, if you listen to him in the debate or even watch his television ads, he doesn't say a single thing about Virginia. He does this where I'm very rooted in living in Richmond and representing my community.
Switching gears slightly, as college students, how has our generation influenced how candidates, including yourself, campaign?
My campaign this year compared to 6 years ago when I ran for re-election, much more focused on digital media than traditional television ads. But we still use TV ads and we do radio. I want to determine what the message is, but I hire people who really know the best way to get that message to people where they are, not where I am.
Continuing on our generation, how will you address the concerns of young voters?
Well, first, I've been very proud to support President Biden's work on student loan forgiveness and public service loan forgiveness. We're bringing down the cost of prescription drugs, not just for seniors, but for everyone.
Well, thank you, Senator Kaine, for joining us today. We appreciate your insight on this historic election.
Thank you, Fiona. Our correspondent, Andrew DiBiasio, joined Dr. Robert Shapiro, the former chair of Columbia University's Political Science Department, to learn more about his correct prediction of the 47th president.
Thank you, Giselle. With me right now is Dr. Robert Y. Shapiro, professor and former chair of the Political Science Department at Columbia University. Welcome, Dr. Shapiro.
Well, this is extraordinarily flattering.
Given that you have developed such a tenured voice on the topic over 40 years, tell me, what does our party system look like today?
We currently have a very partisan, polarized politics. And we currently have 2 political parties, which are really very ideologically distinctive. The parties, through their intra-party politics, wound up differing from each other on issues like abortion, crime and punishment, gun control, energy, the environment, gay rights, all the whole panoply of issues that we see today.
With such high emotional stakes and votes that have been too close to call in the most recent elections, should the American people be worried about partisan debate this time around?
Partisan debate is a good thing. It's increased the tenor. Also, the fact that elections are closer has had a positive effect on voter turnout. That is, we've had, because of this partisan conflict in close elections, people see in close elections their vote matters more. So in recent years, we've had higher levels of voter turnout.
Obviously, we're seeing all of this occur as millennials and Gen Z begin to develop a more political voice. What is something that you have noticed, positive or negative, that is different about how today's young people think politically?
I mean, the biggest change that's been occurring for new generations is where they're getting their information about politics. And increasingly, they're getting their information from social media. And that raises all kinds of questions because of the nature and the way information is assembled and reported in social media. It's basically the Wild West out there. My sense is that and this is the positive side, is that I like to think that from their experiences, people are getting insights in how to deal with the possibility of misinformation. And so people, should be taking what they get on their social media feeds with a grain of salt, unless they know they know that the source is reliable.
Thank you so much, Columbia University's Dr. Robert Shapiro. Now back to the desk.
Thank you, Andrew. Now our producer, Sydney Toff, spoke with an expert about the potential legal complications that may arise now that Trump has been reelected.
Thanks, Giselle. Joining us now is Ellie Honig, a CNN senior legal analyst. Thank you for being here, Ellie.
Thanks for having me, Sydney. It's great to see you. It's been a bit. You were, of course, our star intern at CNN a couple summers ago in the morning show. So I know you woke up at 3 a.m, so I'm happy to do whatever I can to repay you.
Thank you so much. So let's jump right into it. So CNN reported recently that the GOP has, quote, touted that it's been involved in 130 election litigation cases before Election Day. What is the impact of political parties pursuing litigation before November 5th on the certification process, and who's likely to vote?
There have been dozens upon dozens, over 100, as you just reflected in your reporting, of these election challenges happening in the run-up to the election. And largely they've gone unnoticed because they're not quite as dramatic as some of the post-election challenges that we saw after 2020. The one thing that's really important to understand about our election system, there is no one election system. There is no federal election system. And so all the legal disputes are going to be happening at the state and local level. And that's why we've seen so many of these lawsuits. And they relate to everything from mail-in balloting to drop boxes to whether to the date stamps on mail-in ballots to what they call naked ballots, meaning ballots that are sent in without the little security envelope around them. And all of these lawsuits impact hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of votes. Obviously, in an election this close, the outcome of those lawsuits can swing votes or get votes disqualified or counted, and that can make a huge difference. But a big difference we're seeing between now and 2020 is both sides, Democrats and Republicans, are way better prepared and have real lawyers who have been doing this already for months now. So, those are basically done at this point, and then we'll see if we have post-election challenges, which get even messier.
How do state-level lawsuits or refusals to certify elections in certain counties impact the national election results?
Well, so we have to, right, there's a process here. So what happens is each state, I'm generalizing a bit here, each state collects the results from the counties, and then the certification really happens at the state level. It varies a little bit by the mechanics, but usually the governor ends up certifying it, and there's some formalities, ceremonial gatherings involved with that. Each state will sign a document, usually the governor or the secretary of state, saying we certify that our 19 electoral votes, let's say it's Pennsylvania, go to candidate A or candidate B. That form that then gets sent into the U.S. Congress, and then what's supposed to happen on January 6th, we now think of the riots on January 6th. But what is supposed to happen on January 6th is a mechanical counting of the ballots in Congress. It was usually a sort of no-brainer, just a ceremony, no controversy about it. But I think the strategy is if we can gum up one early part of that process, if we can get the counties to hold back, that'll get the states to hold back, or maybe have a dispute within the state about who were the rightly elected electors. And then if a state doesn't send its ballots into Congress, then you could end up in a situation where one candidate doesn't have 270 electoral votes, a majority of electoral votes. And in that instance, if neither candidate has a majority of the votes, it goes to the U.S. House of Representatives, which now the way that works is, heaven help us, I hope this doesn't happen, but if it ever goes to the U.S. House of Representatives, it's not based on 435 votes, one for each member of the House. It's 50 votes, one for each state delegation. So Alaska has one vote, California has one vote. It doesn't matter how big or small the state is or the population is. And in that calculation, it looks very likely, not quite certain because we have congressional races happening now, but very likely that Republicans will have the majority of states, probably 26 or so to 24 or 27 to 23 or something like that. So part of the strategy in 2020 was, let's gum up the works, let's cause chaos. And then if we can get Congress to not certify and they end up stuck where neither candidate has 270, then it goes to the House and probably Republicans win.
That's all the time we have for tonight. Thank you, Ellie Honig, for being here with us.
Thanks, Sydney. Great to see you again. Great job behind the desk.
Giselle, back to you.
Thanks, Sydney. So the state Senate race here in Massachusetts also came to a close last night. We'll hear more about the race when we return from this short break.
Be right there. Wait. Use the shovel and bucket of water, remember? Drown, stir, drown, feel. Then make sure it's cool.
Where'd you learn that?
SmokeyBear.com. Brushed up on some tips before we left. Don't want to start a wildfire, right?
Only you can prevent wildfires.
I don't know why you're so sad. You've got a roof over your head.
Bro, you gotta stop with that depression stuff. That's a white people thing.
Escúchame, en esta casa los hombres no lloran.
You alright?
It just feels like it's coming from everywhere.
Do you want to talk about it?
Thanks for hearing me out, bro. Appreciate it.
You can talk to me if you're feeling sad. Whenever you need to talk, I'm here, okay?
How do you know when you've made the right decision? It's the feeling you get in your gut. The one that tells you what's right or wrong. It's the one that says, sure, I can have a drink. Or the feeling that says, okay, I've been drinking. Now what? It's the voice inside you that says, I'm buzzed. Better leave the car when it's time to go. Plan ahead. Catch a sober ride. Buzz driving is drunk driving.
Welcome back. So Senator Elizabeth Warren won her re-election last night and celebrated with Boston Mayor Michelle Wu. And our correspondent George Lehman was on the scene at the watch party downtown.
In a sea of blue last night, Mass Dems hosted an election watch party in South Boston where Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren spoke to attendees. Emily McCouche, who is a first-time voter in this election, shared with us why she looked forward to the watch party.
I've grew up and lived in Massachusetts my whole life. My family has been Democrats for as far as I can see. And of course, living in Massachusetts my whole life, we're not a swing state, and the closest you can get to like events is normally New Hampshire. So to be around like in an event like this where we have like a major speaker and a bunch of like-minded people, it's very exciting for me.
Joey Pisani, a college student in Boston, explained to us why he thinks Senator Warren should be re-elected for another term.
Students want a future free from gun violence, where they can feel safe to be educated and to go to school. People want to be able to buy their first homes. People want to be able to not have to choose between getting the health care that they vitally need and whether or not they can put food on the table for their children. And I think that that connects to people of all age ranges.
As of late last night, Senator Warren has secured her third U.S. Senate term, defeating challenger John Deaton. The last time Massachusetts has had a Republican senator was in 2012, meaning the win keeps the seat blue in Massachusetts. Now over to Eloise.
Thank you, George. Now, this year's state ballot included several initiatives ranging from education to psychedelics. Joining us live in our studio is our very own correspondent, Natalie Lett, to share the results of these ballot questions. So, thanks for being here with us, Natalie.
Thanks for having me. Starting with question number 1, nearly 72% of Massachusetts voters approved a measure allowing the state legislature to be audited. The state auditor will oversee the inner workings of the state legislature. They make sure state agencies are following existing laws and rules, and they have the court's support to access all documents and records. But there are some limits to the investigative power. Second, voters decided to end the MCAS as a graduation requirement. Nearly 60% of voters approved the measure. Massachusetts was one of the only handful of states requiring standardized tests for high schoolers to graduate. The third question also passed, allowing rideshare drivers to form unions. Uber and Lyft drivers will now be able to negotiate together for better wages and benefits. However, sector-based bargaining is likely to face legal challenges.
So how would a yes on this question impact people who use these rideshare apps?
It would probably make rides more expensive.
Got it. Okay. So what's the next question?
The fourth question was the first no. It was, should psychedelic drugs be legalized? This would have legalized a group of natural drugs, some found in mushrooms, to be grown at home or offered by licensed professionals. Anyone over 21 in the state would have been allowed possession, and there would have been a regulation committee created.
So what were the pros and cons here?
Advocates argued it can be used for mental health treatments, and opposers said it opens the door for drug abuse and that it could be dangerous to grow these substances at home.
Now, there's just one more question here, and based on the amount of posters I've seen around Boston and restaurant windows, I may be able to guess what this one involves.
You're right. The last one was a hot topic and ultimately got a no from voters, and it had to do with tipped workers and their wages. In Massachusetts, the minimum wage is $15 an hour, but this does not apply to workers who are expected to make tips like waitstaff. Their minimum wage is $6.75 an hour. A yes to question number 5 would have phased out the exception and require employers to pay the regular minimum wage by 2029. If this had gone into effect, restaurants would have been allowed to pool tips with other employees who do not interact with customers. It could have also led to restaurant prices increasing because they would need to have a bigger payroll budget. Now, since it did not pass, nothing will change and the wage will still be $6.75 an hour.
Do waitstaff currently get guaranteed tips to make up for this difference?
Yes. So employers do have the responsibility to make sure their employees make $15 an hour if their tips don't.
Got it. Well, thank you so much, Natalie, and back to you, Giselle.
Thank you, Eloise. So millions of voters visited polling locations across the state this year, and our correspondent, Joanna Malvis, was at the State House yesterday to speak with voters after they cast their ballots.
Here in Boston on Election Day, voters came to the polls with different issues they're voting for.
I think my number one issue is definitely climate change.
I care a lot about access to health care, specifically for women's rights.
And also a lot of stuff as a student, like surrounding the ability to access information.
At the State House, voter Martha McNamara says she wants to see strong foreign policy.
It's really important to me that we have a strong foreign policy, that we stand by our allies, that we make sure that NATO is strong.
Meanwhile, at Killichin Hall, voter Jake Atencio says the U.S. should focus more on domestic policy.
There's a lot more that we could be doing here, right, and protecting the people that are coming into the United States. You have so many different people who are relying on the United States for different things.
First-time Massachusetts voter Joshua Carley says he's excited for the state ballot questions.
I just moved here 2 months ago, and I was really inspired by a lot of the propositions that were on the ballot today. I thought they were very progressive and very innovative.
So after talking to multiple voters at different polling locations, all voters seem to be concerned with how divisive this presidential election is. Moreover, one of the major concerns on the Massachusetts ballot is question number 2, with the elimination of the MCAS. For BUTV, I'm Joanna Malvis.
Thank you, Joanna. In this election, we saw Massachusetts voters heading to other states to canvass for their favorite candidate. And our correspondent, Courtney Knight, went to New Hampshire to check it out.
Hi, my name is Kate. Someone stand, click like hand on your computer, and then you can also pause it.
In a classroom packed with volunteers, Boston University's college Democrats spent their evening making calls to Michigan voters with one clear goal: garnering support for Vice President Kamala Harris. Shayna Whiteson, senior at BU, said that collective mobilization as young people is necessary for the political changes they are looking for.
People like kind of knowing that other people are out there doing the work. It's important that it feels like a community and a collective effort, even if like I'm sitting in Boston and I'm from New York, but I'm talking to people in Michigan.
Just an hour's drive away, Democrats in New Hampshire rallied behind the Harris campaign by organizing a door-to-door canvassing event in Nashua. Maggie Hassan, former governor and current senator in New Hampshire, said that it was important for her to show up and encourage volunteers because person-to-person contact is key in winning close elections.
I just wanted to say thank you to people. I wanted them to kind of go out with a little bit of fire in their belly. And this is also the time in any election where we're just trying to remind people when Election Day is and that they need to vote.
Maggie Goodlander, the Democratic nominee for New Hampshire's 2nd Congressional District, emphasized the role of canvassing and protecting reproductive rights this election.
The fight to restore and protect reproductive freedom starts in the people's house, but it's going to require that we have a woman, specifically Vice President Harris, in the White House. And that's what I'm working really hard for these next 240 hours until the most important election in our lifetimes to do.
Sean Badgley, a volunteer from Massachusetts, said he came to canvass for Harris in Nashua because he has been unimpressed with Donald Trump.
I'm a father to a young daughter, and I think it's an indicator when you have to turn off the TV or radio when a presidential candidate comes on because you're afraid of what they'll say.
New Hampshire is a key swing state with tight margins. This year, 2 districts are up for grabs, and New Hampshire Dems are encouraging voters to support Democrats from the bottom up. Reporting for United We Vote, I'm Courtney Knight.
Thank you, Courtney. Millions of Americans voted, but the big question was, how secure was their vote? Our producer, Addison Cummings, spoke with a senior government official about voting infrastructure and the safety of our ballots.
Thank you, Giselle. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency is also known as CISA. Jen Easterly has served as a director since 2021. Director Easterly, thank you for being here.
It's great to be with you, Addie.
Can you give our viewers an overview of what your agency does to ensure the security and integrity of U.S. elections, particularly in this year's election cycle?
Okay, great. Well, great to be with you. CISA is the newest agency in the federal government. We were stood up 6 years ago to play 2 key roles. We serve as America's Cyber Defense Agency and as the National Coordinator for Critical Infrastructure Security and Resilience. So our mission is to protect and defend the cyber and physical infrastructure that Americans rely on and the infrastructure that Americans use to cast their ballots and to ensure that those ballots are counted as cast.
All right, so misinformation and disinformation have become significant threats to the integrity of elections. What steps is CISA taking to combat false information?
Yeah, so Americans have been subjected to a fire hose of disinformation over the past many years. A lot of that disinformation is being produced and spread by our foreign adversaries. And the most important fact that I think everyone should understand is that our voting infrastructure has never been more secure. And I know that because I've spent a lot of the last 3 years on the ground working with state and local election officials to ensure that they have the resources that they need to reduce risk to elections. And for folks who may be skeptical, let me just tell you why I say that. First, important to understand that the systems that Americans use to vote are not connected to the internet. So very hard to hack something that is completely offline. Second, over 97% of registered voters will cast their ballots in jurisdictions where they will get a paper record. And that record is something that they can verify. Now, all the battleground states have paper records because we know it might be close. And so those paper records can be used to recount and audit if necessary. So that's super important. And then finally, election officials over the past few years have put in place multiple layers of safeguards, and that includes cybersecurity protections, physical access controls, pre-election testing of equipment to ensure accuracy, and post-election audits. And all of that is designed to ensure the protection of election infrastructure from compromise and the accuracy of the election results.
CISA's Director Jen Easterly, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you. Back to you, Giselle and Eloise.
Thank you, Addison. The demographic trends, including the black vote, were a major point of discussion in both campaigns. We'll have more on this after a short break.
I wonder if you know that I want the best for you. I know you're going through a lot. I wonder if you know that the big homie needs help too. That you can't just rebound from everything. I know you've been grinding.
Let's go, let's go, let's go.
But how long will you fight solo? I wonder if you know that we can get help. I wonder why we waited so long. Not wondering anymore. Love, your mind. Let's see how far we can go.
The impact of a meal goes well beyond feeding our bodies. Food can open endless possibilities for people to thrive. Because when people are fed, futures are nourished. Everyone deserves to live a full life. And with your help, together we can end hunger. Join the movement at feedingamerica.org/actnow.
Hello and welcome back. Throughout the campaign, Harris's racial and ethnic background was questioned by the opposing party, including Trump. She still is a member of a Divine Nine sorority, a group of historically black Pan-Hellenic organizations. And our correspondent, Mira Danielson, spoke to members of Greek life about increasing black voter turnout.
With Vice President Kamala Harris, a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, as the Democratic presidential nominee, there's a renewed focus on the crucial role of Divine Nine organizations in mobilizing voters. These 9 prestigious Black Greek letter organizations promote political engagement to ensure every voice is heard at the ballot box. Shelby Smither, a graduate chapter member of the South Middlesex chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, said that the Divine Nine organizations are politically involved because of the history of disenfranchisement in the United States.
As Black people, we have such a rich legacy and history of voting. You think about the civil rights movement, and so many people died for us to have the right to vote.
Kofi Frempong, president of the Sigma chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, said that the fraternity's mission of encouraging Black voters is exemplified through their program, "A voteless people is a hopeless people."
One of our probably the most famous brother of the chapter is Brother Martin Luther King Jr. So it's always been a strong emphasis to push for suffrage, to make sure people vote, to make sure people are involved politically.
Ricardo Razan, president of Rho Nu chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, says his chapter hosted presidential watch parties and joint mobilization efforts to prepare for the upcoming election.
It's incumbent on us to continue that work and to make sure that those that come after us have no barriers to voting. So that's something as little as passing out stamps on our campuses or working with other Divine Nine organizations, Black fraternity sororities in Cambridge and in Boston to host voter registration events.
While Divine Nine organizations cannot formally endorse candidates, Harris Sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, created a political action committee that allows members to voluntarily donate to her campaign.
This PAC raised more than $900,000 for causes such as Harris for President and Harris Victory Fund. The organization pledged to continue creating opportunities for members to financially source support for political causes. Reporting for United We Vote, I'm Mira Donaldson.
Thank you, Mira. So despite Harris winning 86% of the black vote, according to an Edison Research and Exit poll, it still wasn't enough to bring her to victory. And if Harris had won, she would have been the first president of both black and South Asian descent.
Now, covering elections is no easy task. Our producer, Sophia Falbo, spoke with the head of the Texas Tribune to see how a nonprofit news organization brings the election to the public.
Thank you, Eloise. Joining us is CEO of the Texas Tribune and National Policy Director for Pete Buttigieg's 2020 presidential run, Sonal Shah. Sonal, thank you so much for making time to speak with us.
Sophia, it's so great to be here with you. Thank you for having me.
The Texas Tribune is the largest nonprofit news organization focused on politics and public policy. How does the Tribune report on this election to ensure coverage is correct when there's so much confusion, especially considering nearly everything must be fact-checked?
I mean, that's a great question, Sophia. The way we are approaching the elections is sort of our teams are divided into three parts. One is covering all of the local races to make sure we're giving voters the information they need to vote. So we're really just giving facts, nothing more. The second is covering sort of what's happening on the ground. And then third, and knock on wood, hopefully we don't have to, that there is an agitation after the vote, just to make sure we're covering and ensuring that, there is a civility afterwards and that there's not agitation.
Given that so many well-known newspapers across the country have given a presidential candidate endorsement, what is it about the particular makeup of the Tribune that lets you stay out of the endorsement game?
Many newspapers have two different sides of their news organization. So there's the reporting side, which is what the editor-in-chief and others focus on, and then there's an editorial board side. We do not have an editorial board that does opinions and endorsements. We just do the reporting side. So we've never had that. I don't foresee us doing that in the future. We think it's important, and we believe at this point, trust is better built when we give communities the information they need to make their own decisions.
That makes sense. So I know Texas is typically a red state. Does this affect the Tribune's coverage of the race at all?
Absolutely not. We cover all of the candidates, all of the issues, all that is going on, same way as we would cover anything else.
One of the key issues in this election is the economy. For undecided voters, especially college students, how can they dissect Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump's economic plans to fully understand how it could impact them?
Economics is so important, and economics is written at so many different levels. Some of these things are things that the president can do. Some of these things are things that are happening globally. If there's a shortage of materials, if there's a shortage of avocados, prices are going to go up. That may not necessarily be a presidential decision. That might actually be how do we do trade with Mexico or what's happening. So I think we need to think through deeply as to what is actually causing the challenges and then what are the policies that will help mitigate those challenges.
Shifting gears again, you've also served as the director of the Office of Social Innovation and Civic Participation in the White House. How has the public's involvement in this election, especially since the first presidential debate, influenced the race?
The more participation there is, the more we actually engage in our communities around us, the better society becomes. It's complicated, it's hard. We have to talk across differences, and we should talk across differences. But most of the time, if we're willing to talk across those differences, we usually find common ground, and it's going to require us coming together to do that.
Sonal Shah, CEO of the Texas Tribune, thanks so much for being here with us.
Thank you for being here, and I really hope everybody goes out and votes. It's important.
Thank you, Sophia. So what happens after an unprecedented election day? What can we expect with another Trump presidency? Stick with us after this break to find out.
If you're buzzed and doing this, to make yourself feel okay to drive,
ZWX.
okay to drive.
YGKLVW. Regular you.
I'm an ex-drug dealer, and I'll be your sub today. Two milligrams of fentanyl can be lethal. A lethal dose is in here. Who gets it, I won't know.
It's cheap, it's potent, and it's profitable.
The sad reality is, fentanyl is being mixed into everything now.
More kitchen now.
Welcome back. Through all of these moments in this historic election, one BUTV alum turned Fox News reporter has had a front row seat. Our correspondent Maria Pemberton discussed all of this and more with her.
Thank you, Eloise. Joining me now is Brooke Singman, political correspondent and reporter for Fox News. The 2024 presidential election marks a significant point in the United States' changing political landscape. What makes this election unique in comparison to previous years?
Typically in election cycles, and presidential election cycles, campaigns are really trying to help the American voter understand who the candidate is. But this is a unique experience for everyone, again, because we have the former president of the United States and the current vice president of the United States running against each other. So these are two people that Americans know very well. They've watched coverage of Donald Trump since 2015 when he announced he was running for president, and they've watched coverage of Vice President Kamala Harris for years and years as well. She was a senator before becoming vice president. She was attorney general in California. These are two political names that people do know, but the reason that this campaign is so interesting is because their policies are so very different. And it's been really just an interesting thing to cover both of them as they really try to spell out in a new way for voters what they stand for.
It's been 8 years since Trump first entered the political space in 2016. You covered him from when he first announced his candidacy through his presidency and now his re-election campaign. How has Trump changed as a candidate in the past 3 election cycles?
Well, I think in 2016, he was new to politics. He didn't know government. He didn't know the political world. And I think coming from the business world, things are run very different in Washington than they're run in typical boardrooms across the country. And you have to kind of learn that environment. So I think 2016 was interesting. I feel like 2016 and 2024 are more similar than 2020 and 2024 because he, again, now is emerging as that outsider who wants to come in and, his final campaign slogan is Kamala broke it, Trump will fix it. And so he can do that again, just like he did in 2016, running against policies of the incumbent administration.
Thank you so much for speaking with us. Fox News' Brooke Singman. Now back to the desk.
Thank you, Maria. According to NPR, Trump and his administration have already planned their first 100 days in office. Within the first few hours, Trump promises to close the U.S. border with Mexico and begin America's largest domestic deportation. He also plans to reverse Biden's climate programs and is preaching his, quote, drill baby drill mantra. This includes cutting energy prices in half within 1 year and offering tax breaks to oil, gas, and coal producers. Trump also vows to pass bills strengthening the economy and cutting taxes. More specifically, he wants to impose a 10% tariff on all imports.
So we know a few details about Trump's cabinet. We know that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. could play a major role in health and human services. RFK Jr. says Trump promised him control of the agency. Kennedy is an activist against vaccinations and has also campaigned against public health measures like fluoride in water.
Harris and Biden both promised a peaceful transition of power. Trump's victory will be confirmed by Congress on January 6th, and he's expected to be inaugurated on January 20th.
And with that, the run for president is largely at a close as Trump becomes the 47th president of the United States of America. BUTV will be closely following his administration, so tune in for further coverage. And that will do it for us here tonight at United We Vote.
I'm Giselle Nimato.
And I'm Eloise Lucina.
Thank you so much for being here with us.